What's up, guys, and welcome to the weekly Q&A. This week, it's a supersized episode all about Solo to celebrate the movie's release, so I will be getting into spoilers in a major way, so if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you stay away from this video until you have. Also, just check out this jacket, it's pretty dope. Molly got it for me off ThinkGeek, and this is not an ad at all, I just think it looks awesome, and I wanted to wear it for the Q&A. Jacob Gallup asks, where do we go with Maul and Kira? How are we going to explore that story further, and in what format? Well, the beauty of the Star Wars canon is that it can be almost anything. It could be another movie, it could be a book or a comic series, it could go any number of ways, and I think a lot of that is going to come down to how Solo performs at the box office, and no matter what, I expect we are going to get more story involving them. I think Lucasfilm is probably going to wait and see and go, is there enough interest in a Solo sequel? And then they might explore that. Or if there's not, they'll probably just go, all right, let's do a book and we'll finish this off. So I think it could go any number of ways. All of them are equally as possible right now. I think it's kind of a wait and see time at this moment. John Petersen wants to know if the announcement of a potential Boba Fett movie on Hollywood Reporter is hints that we could be getting kind of a loosely tied trilogy all about the criminal underworld and Maul. I'm a little skeptical about the Boba Fett thing. The Hollywood Reporter is, I would say, a reliable source, but nothing has been confirmed by Lucasfilm. In fact, I read on Entertainment Weekly that yes, the movie is in development, but it hasn't been greenlit or anything like that. I wouldn't call it a sure thing. I would call it a likely thing. But, I kind of hope that the Boba Fett movie, assuming it happens, takes place really after Return of the Jedi. I would love to see him on adventures after getting out of the Sarlacc pit, which, come on, he totally gets out. I don't know that I would want it to be in that, just before A New Hope era, because I think we're going to get the Kenobi movie as well. That's going to be in between episodes 3 and 4. Rogue One was in between episodes 3 and 4, so was Solo. So, I just want to get into a different time period. I think it would be cooler to follow Boba Fett after Return of the Jedi, but, who knows? It could be anything, and it doesn't really matter. I'm going to see it no matter what. Dylan Thomas asks what I think of Beckett killing Aura Singh. I am into that, and I think he has a one-shot comic coming up, kind of like what they did with DJ and 3PO. So I think Beckett's getting his own story. I wouldn't be surprised if it is the story of how he and Aura Singh got into it, and we'll find out whatever he pushed her off of. So I'm into that. I think she was kind of the perfect choice for a character to reference that wasn't so big that it's like, oh, Aura Singh is dead? We revolt. Kind of like people got upset about Admiral Akbar having such a sudden death in The Last Jedi. Aura Singh isn't like that to me. It's someone that was big enough that we knew her name, but not so big that we would be furious that she died off screen. Plus, I think we're going to get an on-screen death here in that one-shot comic, but I don't know what that's going to be about. I'm just guessing there. Lucas de Carvalho Moreira asks if the movie changes Chewie's life debt with Han. I was actually expecting to see a moment where they talk and Chewie pledges a life debt to him, and that never happened. It may have happened kind of more mentally in an unspoken way, because on Kessel, Chewie has these moments where Han allows him to go help the Wookiees. It's not really allowing him. He gives him his blessing. He's like, yeah, I understand you need to do this. And then later, Chewie's like, do I go with the Wookiees or do I stay with Han? And then he sees Han do this selfless act again to help Lando in L3. And he's like, I'm going to stay with this guy. So that could be Chewie mentally kind of making a life debt and just saying, I'm going to help this guy. He seems worthwhile. But it also could be that we just haven't seen the life debt yet. I said before that I was kind of hoping that we would get to see Han save Chewie and his family from slavery, and that would be this whole extra level of depth to the life debt, because it's you didn't just save Chewie, you saved his entire family. That makes a lot of sense. And we do know, according to Aftermath Life Debt, that yeah, it's still about Han saving Chewie from slavery to a degree. So I'm kind of expecting that maybe we haven't seen the life debt yet. Right now they're just buddies. maybe they're going to go off and look for Chewie's family because that's what he's doing. I am thinking that maybe they are enslaved somewhere and he is trying to find them. And it's a lot like the story from Star Wars Legends where Han meets Murg, who is kind of a Chewbacca stand-in, and he is looking for his wife, who is enslaved. So we might get that version of the story in a book or a future movie or a comic or something, what have you, where they go off and they try to find Han's or Chewie's family and rescue them. And then maybe that'll be the life debt. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think that the movie necessarily changed it. I think that there was enough there that they could say, yeah, that was the life debt. Or they could be like, no, we haven't seen it yet. I think it could go either way. Alden Diaz asks what I think of L3's brain being part of the Falcon now. I think that was a fun connection. It kind of adds a little extra something to the scenes where 3PO is trying to talk to the Falcon and talks about kind of how strange the computer is. And there's also mentions of the Falcon's brains in the Last Jedi novelization. And at that point, I'm pretty sure Jason Fry knew what was happening because he said some pretty specific things about the Falcon's computers. And basically now I just want to go back and explore all those times that we got to see the computers and see which parts are L3. I think that, yeah, it's a good idea. And it gives a more personal connection to the Falcon between Lando and the Falcon. So it gives him more ownership and reason to love the ship. So yeah, I think it was a great idea and a fun little connection. Steve Shaw wants to know if fan expectations or speculation can ruin seeing a film or make it less fulfilling. And I wanted to talk about this from a more personal level, because I do think that sometimes having this channel adds a little extra pressure to seeing a Star Wars film for the first time. Like, my mind is honestly not just on the film. It's really hard for me to just sit back on my first viewing and enjoy it as a fan and nothing else. Like, I try to, but I find it very hard to switch off and just relax, even in my normal everyday life. So then when I'm at a Star Wars movie and I'm like, oh, I've got to do a review and I've got to do like a bunch of videos about this thing, and there's a lot going on in my head. So I wanted to kind of talk about that and say that it does, I think, change how I view Star Wars. And after Rogue One and The Last Jedi and Solo, I kind of came out of the movie and I was like not sure how I felt, and it's a very strange feeling. And then the more I see a movie, like Rogue One especially, the more I saw it, the more I loved it. And I think the same is going to be true for Solo. The Last Jedi, I did like it more when I saw it a second and third times, but not to the same extent as Rogue One. Like, that one really grew on me, and I think Solo probably will as well. I think I'll probably bump it up to like a solid 8 or 9 out of 10 once I see it a couple more times. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think some of that is due to my own speculation. I mean, when trailers come out, I don't go wild with theories or speculation, but I do break them down, and I'm like, maybe this is going to happen, and I'm almost always wrong, but I kind of expect that. Like I said, I was expecting some things with Chewie and his family and the life debt. None of that happened, and that's okay, but I do kind of build up things in my head. Like the train sequence, I thought that was going to be like the climax of the movie, and then it wasn't. So I think to a degree it can change how you view a movie. And I do think that going in blind is probably the best way to do it, but I don't have that discipline. I mean, I love watching the trailers, and part of the fun is breaking it down. And I think everyone just has to go in with the expectation that, I'm probably wrong about all of this, and it's something that I myself need to work on. Tyler Lawrence asks how I feel about Han shooting first against Beckett when they were friends not all that long ago. I think that was great. I mean, I think that was kind of Han's character development for the film, and it kind of puts him in that position of him shooting first in A New Hope, which both Kazdans, John and Lawrence, were like, yes, in our minds, Han shot first in the cantina. And I think they were trying to communicate that here as well. I will say that, I mean, he shot Beckett, and I really liked that he ran up and then was kind of holding him, and they had a good moment. It reminded me a lot of Maul and Obi-Wan in Star Wars Rebels. I really liked that moment. I was terrified that Beckett was going to be like, "Good job, kid. Always shoot first." Like, I would have really not liked that line, and I'm glad they didn't cross it. I think the way they handled it was very, very good. So, yeah, I was a fan of that moment. Felipe Bin's Eli wants to know how I felt about the Falcon being kind of torn apart in the Kessel Run instead of just slowly damaged by Han over time. I really liked the Kessel Run and seeing the Falcon just get banged up more and more, and then when it arrived on Savareen, it's just falling apart, like half the landing gear is gone, it's tilted on one side, and then his interaction with Lando, like, "It's a hell of a ship," and he's like, "I hate you. I know. I never want to see you again." Like, I thought all of that was really, really well done and just funny. And I still think that, at least on the inside, Hans did modify the Falcon. I mean, he just didn't take care of it. There's some really funny lines in the book Last Shot about how he just kind of didn't bother to take care of the Falcon on the inside because it was just too clean for him when Lando had it. It was like, who can live like this? So yeah, I think that it's a little of both, where it does get really messed up in the Kessel Run, and that was fun to watch, but also Han does kind of, not neglect it, but he just has different priorities when it comes to the Falcon, so it does change under his ownership, and I'm sure he still modified it over time. Berkeley Boy wants to know if I think we'll ever see the job that went bad and put Han on Jabba's bad side. Yeah, probably. I don't know if they'll tell it, again, in a book or a comic or a solo sequel or something, but I do expect we will get those details sooner or later. I mean, we do know enough. I don't really think they'll explore it in a movie, honestly. I think it'll probably just be, at some point we're going to learn specifically what went down, but we know that he had cargo for Jabba that he had to dump because he was going to be boarded by Imperials, and that's kind of all we need to know. We don't have to have that story filled in. I wouldn't mind having that story filled in, so I guess just because it was filled in Legends, I expect that we'll get it in canon at some point as well. Derek Horkel wants to know if Han using his gold dice in the game of Sabacc to win the Falcon has been retconned. That was originally set up in the Force Awakens visual dictionary, and I can't decide. Part of me wants to say no. I think that it's possible that we just didn't see them use the dice. I mean, it's supposed to be used in a very specific version of Sabacc called Corellian Spike, and the new Solo visual guide tells us that when you roll the dice, it basically triggers the cards to shuffle, which is kind of like an analog version of the interference field and the cards changing their face value, which was all set up in Legends, and I think is still true in versions of the game in canon as well. But I think that it's possible they used the dice, we just didn't see that. But if they were to say, no, we just retconned that, I'd be okay with it, because I always see the reference guides like that as more like fun little details, fill in the gaps, but if a movie wants to tell a different story, I don't think Lucasfilm has to be like, well, in this one reference book that like 2% of the Star Wars fandom has read, we said this. I don't think that if something makes sense for a story, that they would stick so strictly to what they said in a reference book. So I'd be okay if it were retconned, but in my mind, I think that there's still room for it. Sebastian Lamoureux asks how I felt about Maul's inclusion from a more general audience standpoint. I'm thrilled that they did that. I am blown away by it. I never would have guessed they'd put Maul in this movie. I've said before, I said it in my review, that I think Lucasfilm is rightfully cautious when they put these connections into the films. Something like Saw Gerrera, it's like, you don't need to have seen the Clone Wars to get that character, but Maul is like, I hope you watched the Clone Wars, or else you're going to wonder how this guy's still alive. And yeah, I like that Lucasfilm is now trusting the more general audience, the people that only see the movies. They're just trusting them to go figure it out for themselves. They're like, hey, either go watch the Clone Wars or Google it, figure it out. And then I think that's probably a good idea to get people interested in the Clone Wars. They might be like, oh, so the Clone Wars tells the story of how this guy survived, and that's kind of interesting, and maybe they start watching it. I mean, I think it's a smart move on all fronts. Scotty J-Ro wants to know where Tag and Bink were. Great question. I totally forgot to look for them in the movie. I think I know where they are. I have a solid guess, I think. I saw the guys on Collider, I believe, say that they thought that they were the Mimban troopers that were watching Han and Chewie fight. I can see that, but all of the promotional photos we saw of Tak and Bink, they were in Imperial officer uniforms, and they looked like they were on Corellia in that kind of customs area. I think that Tak and Bink are probably the guys that walked up and pulled the wrong guy out of the line. When Han was hiding, he had the coat on and his hat on. He's trying to avoid the Empire. And I think two officers come up to some random dude and they're like, "Sir, you need to come with us." And they drag him away. I would be willing to bet that that was Tak and Bink, because it's kind of like, all right, they bungled a little job there. It's a very Tak and Bink thing to do. So that's my guess, and we're going to have to wait and see. I'm sure someone will confirm it on Twitter at some point. That's it for patron questions. If you're a patron and you didn't see your question answered here, just head over to Patreon, where I left you a written response, but also give me a little time because I got a lot of questions about Solo. I've got a lot of work to do in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to answer them all, but just kind of bear with me. I'm going to answer them as I can. If you're not a patron, you can learn more by following the link in the description. Just $1 a month will get you access to extra Star Wars Explained content like audio commentaries for the films, or Molly and I just tried something new. Right after we saw Solo, we just sat down right here together and we talked about our reactions for like 45 minutes. We meant to do it for 15 minutes. It wound up being 45 minutes because we were just having fun talking about it. So that is available to all of our patrons right now, and you can check that out in the link in the description. On to YouTube questions. Jer Lonber asks if Maul has been leading a criminal empire since the Clone Wars. I would assume so, kind of. I mean, the last we saw him, he was in charge of the Shadow Collective, which was like a group alliance of criminal syndicates, and then that kind of fell apart in the Son of Dathomir comic. So I think he kind of got taken down a peg. He was still in charge of Death Watch for a little while, and then in the Ahsoka book, and in some of the unfinished concept art for the Clone Wars seasons 7 and 8, we know that he was ousted off of Mandalore. So I think he was completely taken down a peg, and he probably started Crimson Dawn from the ground up. So I do think he wasn't sitting around just moping. I think he probably immediately got to work trying to rebuild his empire again, and I think that's what Crimson Dawn turned into. So we'll probably figure out what he's been up to exactly. I am excited to see it because I've said this before, I was not a fan of them bringing Maul back in the Clone Wars, but all of his stories in the Clone Wars and beyond have been so good that I have to let it pass. So yeah, I'm excited to see more from him. I think he's a great character. I love that we got to see Ray Park and Sam Witwer reprise their roles. I haven't said that yet. So yeah, there's a lot to be excited for when it comes to Maul. Ben Falk wants to know what I thought of the new crawl that wasn't a crawl. Did I like Solo or Rogue One's intro more? I thought it was fine. I thought it was interesting. I still kind of think that just even the anthology movies should have crawls, and I guess this was a happy in-between. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I didn't feel like the crawl added too much. Like, I don't think I would have been confused without it. So I guess I kind of prefer Rogue One's intro, where it's just, let's dive in. We don't really need this extra info. If they're going to give us extra info, I'd prefer it be a crawl. Like, I mean, the books often get crawls. The comics all get crawls. So I just love seeing the crawl at the start of a Star Wars movie. It doesn't bother me really that we don't have one in Solo or Rogue One. It's just kind of this interesting thing where personally I'd be fine if they did it for every movie, but obviously they're not going to do that. So I thought that the blue text crawl that wasn't a crawl was fine, but I also thought it was not totally necessary. Jeb asks if the blades used by Dryden Voss are the same technology as the Praetorian Guard weapons. I don't think so. They are mentioned as Kyuzo weapons in the Solo visual guide, so it sounds like they are different, but kind of similar tech, but I wouldn't call it the exact same thing. Geek Studios wants to know if I like how the Kessel Run being done in 12 parsecs was handled. yes, I liked it very much. Something that I liked about the Legends version is that it's very ambiguous as to whether or not it's actually true, because the Falcon's instruments fail in the middle of the run, and they read 12, but Chewie's like, I don't think that's right, and Han's like, oh, it's right, I'm telling everyone 12. And it's kind of the same, like, he lands on Savareen, he's like, just did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, and nobody cares. Like, it's important to Han and nobody else, so I like that. And I also like that Chewie says something, he's like, it's 12 if you round down, buddy. So, A, it was probably closer to 13, and he's saying 12. Then we jump forward to A New Hope, and he says it made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs to Obi-Wan. So now he's modifying his legend again, and he's saying 12, which is not true. And, again, Obi-Wan can roll his eyes because he's lying, and he doesn't care. No one cares about the Kessel Run, so yes, I do like the way it was handled. I thought it was funny, and it kind of had some nods to Legends, and yeah, I like the ambiguity of it all. Baggles asks if Maul's inclusion opens up the door for characters like Thrawn or Ahsoka to appear on the big screen. This is funny. I had a video planned. I hadn't written it or done any real work on it because I was like, I should probably wait until after Solo for this. But the title of the video was going to be why I wouldn't expect a Thrawn or an Ahsoka standalone movie anytime soon. And it's because of what I said earlier, where I just think that Lucasfilm is so cautious. They don't want to alienate viewers. They're not going to give an Ahsoka movie out to the general audience who doesn't even know who Ahsoka is. And now I don't think that's true. I'm very glad I didn't do any work on that video. I just had the idea and I put it off. Because, yeah, I think that it does open doors. I think it's possible. I still wouldn't expect an Ahsoka-specific movie. I wouldn't expect a Thrawn standalone movie, but I do think that there is potential for them to be included in other stories in live action. I mean, I think Maul is proof of that. I'm very excited by that possibility. I think it's great. So, yeah, I just thought it was funny that you singled out Thrawn and Ahsoka when I had done the same thing, and I was going to be like, nope, probably not going to happen anytime soon, and now I'm like, yeah, I think I was dead wrong. Ethan Lutgen wants to know if I think Maul's scene was a good way to sneak in a lightsaber to the movie, because I did think that Solo would be the first Star Wars movie to not feature a lightsaber. I think that, yeah, it was fine. I really liked that it was the Inquisitor lightsaber from Star Wars Rebels. I do think it's a little silly that he ignited it at all, because Kira knows who she's talking to. He didn't need to ignite it to be like, you know it's me, right? You know it's Darth Maul? Like, that was for the audience, and it's fine. It was just like remember the guy with the double-bladed red lightsaber? It's him. He's still alive. Go Google it. And we've been kind of joking about why did he ignite it? Like, maybe he just killed the Inquisitor. Maybe he just wanted to show it off. Like, Kira, look what I got. It's pretty cool. Just killed an Inquisitor for it. Like, I don't know. It's just a little bit goofy. It was purely for fans to help recognize him, I think. But yeah, if you're going to get a lightsaber in it, like, that's how you do it. It made sense. David Bergelv asks if Beckett was planning to betray Han from the start, or if it was only after Han sided with Enfys Nest. The way I see it, it was a decision made after Han sided with Enfys, because I think Beckett really did like Han. I think that betraying him was just his best way to survive. It's kind of a theme of the movie, where even like Kira said, it's not about winning the game, it's about staying in it as long as you can. So I think he was just trying to stay in the game, and he thought that betraying Han was the way to do it. I don't think he wanted to do it, it's just that he had to in his eyes. Nicolas Cage wants to know if Dryden Voss could be Mandalorian. I don't think so. The visual guide lists him as near human, and I believe that we've read somewhere that those scars on his face, the way they light up when he gets emotional and he gets those bloodshot eyes, that is a hallmark of his species. So he isn't quite human, but I wouldn't say that he's Mandalorian. I think the armor that he had in his office was just something he collected at some point. I mean, he had collections from all over the place. He had a Sith holocron, and I don't think he was a Sith. I just think that he was a collector of such things. Joshua Pong wants to know what I thought of the Imperial March being used for Imperial recruitment as an in-universe canon song. I thought it was great, and it actually was already an in-universe canon song because Star Wars Rebels used it as the Imperial anthem during the episode Empire Day. It was for an Imperial parade. So yeah, I thought that was a great connection to Star Wars Rebels, and I thought it was a good idea back then. So they just play it in like a major key to make it sound more upbeat. I think it's a lot of fun. It was great to see it in the movie. Spicy Zombie wants to know if I think we'll get a Han and Chewie book about Chewie searching for his family. I kind of touched on this earlier, and I don't know, it could be any number of things. It could be in a solo sequel, it could be a comic, it could be a book. But yeah, I am kind of hoping we explore that story further. We know that his family from Star Wars Legends is canon, and I would like to see him kind of go on that adventure. I think it would be cool to have Han and Chewie bond even more, especially over such a personal mission. And I still want to see like the life debt happen on screen, so to speak. Not necessarily in a movie, but on a book, on the page, or on a comic book. I would like to see that tale told. Lit Dank Deluxe Foundation asks who I think that big shot gangster putting together a crew is on Tatooine. I have to imagine that it's Jabba the Hutt. I can't think of anyone else that they would be teasing for that. I mean, it's gotta be Jabba. Luke Goodwin wants to know if Han was just a standard member of the Imperial Army or if he was a specialized unit on Mimban because his helmet and armor seemed a little different and special. He was classified as a mud trooper, but I think that was more just because they were on Mimban. I think probably all of the standard members of the Imperial Army were stuck in mud trooper outfits because Mimban is covered in mud. So I think that if he were on any other planet, he probably just would have been a regular member of the Imperial Army. That's all the time I have for questions today. If you have a question for next week's video, just leave it in the comments below or sign up for Patreon to join our weekly Q&A discussion. If I get another list of unique questions for Solo, I might do another supersized episode like this. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.